The 2.0 anniversary for Company of Heroes 3 has brought a very large change to the game with a balance patch, many different changes, art updates, new soundtracks, and a variety of other things. With it, however, has come the new Fire and Steel DLC, bringing a new battle group into each of the factions. For today, I'm going to be doing an in-depth dive of the Wehrmacht Terror battle group, focusing on suppression, buffing yourself up by suppressing enemy infantry, and having some very potent late-game tools with a V1 rocket strike and the King Tiger. If you enjoy this deep dive, make sure to like and subscribe. But otherwise, let's go ahead and jump into a game where we can talk about these various CP choices, what they do, and speculate on where they may be useful. To start this deep dive off, let us go into the left side of the Terror battle group, focusing on terror tactics. This side of the tree largely is going to have a focus on debuffing enemy infantry while buffing and enhancing your own infantry with various abilities brought upon by killing and forcing enemy units to retreat. Our first choice is going to be a pick between the Interrogate ability, giving us a way to gain extra experience on top of revealing stuff in the Fog of War, or Contempt for the Weak, which buffs our infantry units that are nearby when we force an enemy unit to retreat. Let's take a look at Interrogate first and see exactly what it does. All infantry units that you have in your roster, so Grenadiers, Pioneers, Stoss Troop, Panzer Grenadiers, Jaegers, and etc., will all gain the ability to interrogate killed enemy units. An icon will appear when a model is reasonable to interrogate. Now, the tooltip says that you gain a range of 90 recon, similar to something like the 221 recon, for 15 seconds, revealing enemies with little indicators in the Fog of War. On top of that, the casualty, when it is killed after it is interrogated, gives you 230 experience, giving a fairly decent little boost to units. For example, the Grenadier squad, it has a level of 800 experience to get to Vet 1, meaning that you get about a quarter of your Vet 1 experience from one casualty being interrogated. So let's go ahead and actually show what this looks like. Oop, that was actually a friendly squad, so let me actually make it an enemy first before we do this. So enemy, then kill. So once a model dies, we generally get one of these activated abilities to use. Sometimes there can be multiple. But as you see, we have interrogated. And now, in the area around us, we have seen a variety of units in the Fog of War. On top of that, you can also notice the Grenadier actually got a little more than 230 experience. This is because, seemingly, the infantry officer quarters gains you extra experience, giving you a 25% increase. So on average, you're actually getting about 300 experience per casualty interrogated. It being super quick to also do, and the bonus recon, means that this is a pretty passive way to just get more experience on your units in the long term, and in the short term, you're able to just gain a little bit of extra knowledge. And it seems like a fairly generalist ability that you never complain about having. The alternative to interrogate is the Contempt for the Weak, a passive ability that makes it so that anytime an enemy retreats within 18 range of one of your units, then you gain a series of benefits, including 20% higher rate of fire and a 33% increase in capture and decapture speed for 15 seconds. Also, if another unit retreats while this ability is active, it gets refreshed. So let's show this off by converting some units and retreating them. And we retreat. So now we have our activated Contempt for the Weak, giving our units higher fire rate, on top of also increasing their decapture speed. Then, as it starts to come to an end here, if this section retreats, it now refreshes. Overall, this is another ability similar to Interrogate, where it's just kind of like a passive thing that happens, and this can especially be good if you combine it with something like an MG42 that pretty much forces enemy infantry to retreat, or if you get more aggressive with Grenadiers, or notably something like Panzer Grenadiers. So overall, this is a solid but more aggressive version of Interrogate, I would say, where Interrogate is a bit more just passively giving you like some extra XP and whatnot, whereas Contempt for the Weak really wants you to be like taking aggressive engagements and then forcing enemies to retreat out of bad positions, which then allows you to kind of snowball by capturing a bit faster and fighting better. Our next split choice in terror tactics is between the Jericho Trumpet, a loiter that does not deal any damage, but instead is debuffing various units, and then Propaganda Leaflets, which is another call-in airstrike that essentially will force enemy units to retreat. Let's go ahead and look at the Jericho Trumpet first. It costs 110 munitions in order to utilize, but does a variety of different things, namely giving 35% slower speed and 15% less accuracy. Let's go ahead and see what this feels like with this effect. As you can see, it has quite the large radius, pretty much covering the entire screen when active. But we will activate it. And now these squads are under effect, and we will go in, charging in. And then we will try to tell the enemy to move away, similar to how maybe an infantry section would move. And you can essentially see they are moving very slowly. Like 35% is a pretty significant downside and makes it hard for units to effectively retreat in the area. Let's try to retreat the 6-pounder as well. Now, notice it actually only affects infantry. Team weapons are unaffected by this. So that means that you mainly want to use this against things like infantry squads, whether to stall down an assault or to do something like just make it harder for the enemy to do anything. This could have good synergy with something like Contempt for the Weak, because if a Panzer Grenadier runs up to an infantry section, then you get that benefit of the Contempt for the Weak, making your units even stronger and potentially making for a devastating push. The other choice we can go instead of Jericho Trumpets is the Propaganda Leaflet Drop, which for 20 seconds has an area of effect that forces all infantry and team weapon crews to automatically retreat. Units that cannot retreat, like essentially towed weapons, cannot retreat and are not affected by it. But it also does deal no damage. But let's just show off what this looks like after I set these actually to enemy. So let's go ahead and see this forcing the retreat. So as you see, these two units are retreating and now have been forced to retreat, and they will retreat all the way back to base. Towed weapons will not retreat since they can't actually move, so it's still a highly effective tool, as that was a very quick thing, and this lingers for 20 seconds, meaning you can really just use this as an area denial. Now, it does also cost 110 and does no actual damage, but it can definitely dislodge like a wall of 6-pounder AT guns or something that is threatening your units, making it hard for the enemy to support something like their 17-pounder, leaving it potentially open for an infantry unit to go in and kill it. Then, to round out this left side of the tree, we have the V1 Rocket Strike. This V1 is an interesting off-map. Not only is it extremely destructive in its power, it also does not offer warning flares, meaning that if the enemy is not paying attention, this could potentially sneak up on them and deal a devastating blow. Let's go ahead and see it. As it costs a whopping 250 munitions, we'll drop it in the middle of these three squads and see how the blast radius looks and feels. So as you see, no rating flares. However, there will be a distinctive sound. So as you see, This 17-pounder that was very much on the radius outside of it didn't really get hurt, but this nearly killed the Churchill and practically wiped the foot guards out entirely. If anything was even a little bit closer to the center of the circle, it would have died. So this is essentially like a nuclear strike in terms of it, and will pretty much delete anything and everything caught in its blast radius, making it a very, very powerful ability if you pay that high price for it. Moving over to the left side of the tree, our first split choice in the weapon superiority tab is either the machine gun camouflage or heavy gunnery. Machine gun camouflage is a 0 CP effect that allows MG42 and other machine gun crews to gain ambush camouflage, giving them a damage and accuracy boost when firing from it. Or heavy gunnery allows you to fire with suppressive fire as an activated ability off of the listed units. The 221 Scout Car, the 251 Half Track, the Stug 3, the Panzer IV, and the King Tiger. Let's go ahead and show off the machine gun camouflage, as this is likely one of the more common things you'll see. Obviously, as you see, when in cover, the machine gun team has gone into it. And with that ambush camouflage, the MG42 should be an absolutely devastating machine gun. As you see, that first burst practically annihilated another squad, and each burst pretty much killed an enemy infantry section in the open, which is a lot of damage and is a very, very powerful ability, especially because when this unit is in camouflage, it has a range all the way out here, which is very, very strong because detectors only need to be in about 20 range. And I believe machine guns have upwards of 40 range, meaning that this machine gun is very hard to actually detect before it sees you and starts blasting you with very high damage and high suppression capabilities. I could very much see the MG42 camouflage being a key way to do things like contempt for the weak, as it's a very potent way to force enemy squads to retreat quickly, which your infantry can then utilize to get their buffs and go in with their extra fire rate and capture speed. The alternative option for our first choice is heavy gunnery, which when activated for 1 CP allows us to pay 30 munitions to temporarily grant the following units the ability to cause suppression. So let's go ahead and just quickly show that off. Set this to enemy, and we'll activate heavy gunnery. As you can see, the suppression is actually pretty quick. One burst managed to suppress a infantry unit in the open. Now, the damage is not significantly massive. However, this ability is going to have a lot of synergy with an upcoming effect, No Quarter. However, this also is another option to work with Contempt for the Weak, where we are able to gain the benefits of forcing enemy units to retreat while this is active, combined with getting other units to support in killing, and you can get a fairly effective tool going. Keep in mind, though, that units that get heavily suppressed also take less damage overall. So as you see, the 250 is now dealing that higher damage and actually killing models, but once it had pinned the squad, it itself was not able to really cause as much damage. So it is a bit of a trade-off, and it's more of a utility thing in support of enemy units rather than something you purely want on its own, especially since it has a munition cost and a decent cooldown time. Our follow-up choice, which I just mentioned, was No Quarter. This is a purely passive effect for 4 CP that infantry with an 18 range of a suppressed or pinned enemy unit gain 25% accuracy. So let's show this off by using heavy gunnery again on an infantry squad and then moving a panzer grenadier in line, as 25% accuracy is quite the significant benefit. Activate heavy gunnery, and as this squad is suppressed, our panzer grenadiers now go in. Now that they're relatively in range, you see they get the 25% accuracy, which combined with the pretty much just the DPS of like a Panzer Grenadier means they very quickly eliminate whatever is in front of them. This can be a pretty strong combination, and it can even stack with Contempt for the Weak. Something like this setup combined with Contempt for the Weak could allow for you to pretty much make it so no matter what the enemy is doing, they are getting suppressed, and then if they retreat, your units get buffed, and if they don't retreat, you're just dealing way more damage to them. It overall is a fairly synergistic package of these different abilities. The other option we have for weapon superiority is the Defend the Fatherland activated ability, essentially giving all units in friendly territory, or all infantry squads in friendly territory, a weapon accuracy and rate of fire increase for every model they have lost, capping out at 75% less damage and 50% more accuracy and rate of fire, which are pretty significant buffs. It has a cost of 75 munitions, and let's go ahead and just activate this and flip a unit, and we'll just see how it looks. So we will activate it, and as you see, all these various effects are going off. Now, sadly, it does not say where these things are, but essentially, the lower you have models-wise, the bigger the buff is. I believe it is going to correlate more with your various units. So, like, for example, the Grenadier needs to lose more models before it gets the same damage reduction and accuracy bonus as something like the Stoßtruppen, which only losing one model, I believe, should get a bigger benefit off of. Regardless, this is a generically strong defensive ability, allowing your units to just fight really well. Valor in the British Indian Artillery battle group can be a fairly potent option. So, Defend the Fatherland, it does have a price to it, but it does allow you to maybe turn important fights in your favor, whether right at the end of a match where you just need to, like, win one last fight and delay them, or more in various scenarios where maybe you're down a model or two on some of your squads, you can continue the fight even long past when you normally should. And our grand finale is that of the King Tiger. For 9 CP, we get access to a very strong tank that has a very serious downside. It costs 800 manpower, 180 fuel, and 24 pop cap. When called in, our fuel income will halve as long as it is alive on the battlefield. The King Tiger has some real things that are other downsides on top of that. Namely, it has a very low max speed. 3.25 is practically the same as the Black Prince, making it extremely slow to actually maneuver on the battlefield. However, it does have some things that are going for it. It has a pintle upgrade increasing its anti-infantry firepower, but the other major benefits is that it has very high armor, the same as the Black Prince on the front, slightly less on the sides and noticeably less on the rear. However, it also has a very powerful Vet 1, which allows it to take 25% less damage on frontal armor hits, just passively. This is very powerful because it means that the King Tiger essentially gets an extra 200 to 300 health in the front, which is very, very powerful in tank fights, as that often means an extra shot or two to bring it down. I'm going to show you an example of how the King Tiger fights, as its gun also seems quite potent. We'll put it at Vet 1 because I expect the King Tiger will generally arrive at Vet 1 due to the fact that it will often arrive very late in the game and you likely have the officer quarters for the Panzer Head HQ, which should mean this arrives with Vet 1 naturally. But we'll match it up against the Black Prince, which is probably one of the strongest British or Allied tanks out there that can contest the King Tiger. Now, as you see, the King Tiger bounced the shot of the Black Prince, but penetrated itself. Now, they will bounce off of each other, as they both have some of the heaviest armor in the game. But as you see, the King Tiger is actually winning the HP fight. It has an HP advantage. Its fire rate is overall slower than that of the Black Prince, and it seems most other heavy tanks. But overall, the King Tiger does generally seem to reliably beat the Black Prince in a head-on fight, due to its thick armor and the fact that its gun seems to be on the higher end. It seems to just penetrate more. And the damage reduction, for example, the King Tiger probably should have died or maybe have been on very low health here. Now, on top of that, we also have some other notable things. We'll take a look at its veterancy, especially once it reaches Vet 3. The King Tiger gains generally just weapon accuracy, rate of fire, and some other things, but its unique Vet 3 bonus is a 25% damage reduction on side armor, essentially meaning that only rear shots will deal the full normal damage that they're supposed to, making the King Tiger even better at resisting shots and just overall being even more of a tank. On top of that, its anti-infantry is nothing to slouch at either. Let's pull up quickly a guard foot sections just to show this off, and we'll delete this bunker so they don't mess with it, but we'll set this to enemy, and the King Tiger can go off. As you see, it just practically annihilated the foot guard in one shot. So it seems to have kind of the same lethality as like the Tiger. And even though it only has the regular range of a tank instead of the Tiger's bonus range, the extra armor does potentially mean it will win against pretty much anything in a 1v1. But that downside is quite the real one. Overall, I get the impression that the Terror Battle Group is going to be a fairly well-rounded option that can support practically any build, with mainly your choices coming down to how much you want to lean into the whole suppress and force enemies to retreat for benefits. If you do want to do that and you want to go for like Contempt the Weak, things like Propaganda Leaflet, Heavy Gunnery, and No Quarter, this would, I think, lean much more towards the Panzer Grenadier Company as your tech path, as Panzer Grenadiers are just simply the best for combat, for making use of all of these effects. On top of that, this building has not only the 251, but also the Stug, 2 units that can benefit from heavy gunnery. And the Panzer Grenadiers naturally benefit from getting close to enemies, meaning Contempt for the Weak and No Quarter makes them absolutely monstrous once they get close against suppressed squads and force the retreat. Stuff like Propaganda Leaflet Drop is able to further support this, forcing retreats just outright. And then you can finish the game off with the V1 and King Tiger that you'll always get in the late game. However, there is another option. If you want to play with a bit less of a up-close, aggressive, in-your-face suppressing style, then stuff like Interrogate, Jericho Trumpet, the MG, and Defend the Fatherland seem to lean a bit more on the defensive overall and seem to more naturally fit with the Luftwaffe company, where Jaeger squads will benefit more from being supported by camo machine guns. The Jericho Trumpet is just a generically strong tool to slow enemy assaults down. Defend the Fatherland is another defensive ability. And Interrogate just gradually gives you bonus experience and a little bit of intel for when you need it until you can reach your late game units. In terms of the late game units, the V1 strike is obviously just like a nuclear bomb, and the King Tiger definitely seems like it is an ultra late game unit, only really gotten when you are at maximum pop cap, so you don't suffer as much from its having fuel income effect, which is quite the crippling effect if you don't have your full roster out. But if you're up at about 76 pop cap, which is the most you can have as the Tiger's 24, then the King Tiger coming in can be a very powerful option, it seems like. Being able to pretty much 1v1 any tank fairly reliably, being very hard to kill, on top of just still having the incredible killing power of the Tiger, means that it is kind of a very good spearhead unit. I would not expect to see it much in like 1v1 where it's very expensive, but in team games, you know, you're probably seeing this a lot, and it's a very real threat you'll have to deal with. And that is going to do it for this deep dive into the Terror Battle Group. Let me know down your own thoughts on this battle group. Have you played against it? Have you played with it? Have you had success with the King Tiger? How destructive has the V1 been for you? What is your general build order for this battle group? It's an exciting time in Company of Heroes, and I plan on doing a video like this for all the new battle groups in the Fire and Steel DLC. So again, make sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on those coming up in the coming days. But otherwise, if you've watched all the way through, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a good day.